Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review R.I.P.D. So, going into this film, no matter how anybody is to really just feel about this film, I find it fun. I find this movie to be like a fun film. And plus, also, I've been really wanting for a very long time to review this, regardless of how well it does, regardless of how well received this movie is, and so on and so forth, because people probably might hate this film. Some people might find this movie to be whatever they feel about it, but I in turn just enjoy this movie. It also fits, of course, a supernatural theme to it, so I'm kind of easily won over by this film. Just because we have a Western kind of style for this. We have this kind of being broken down in a Men in Black kind of fashion of a supernatural thing. And plus, I just really believe that they easily got this idea from Men in Black. Whoever was to have eventually come up with the Dark Horse comic book to put this all together. I thought that this movie was rather fun. Yeah, it does have some... it is a comedy piece. We have Roy Cephas, a goofy, weird name in this film. And so, going on into here, what is this film about, just in case anybody wants to know? Where can you go and find this film? Well, currently, of course, it's not an easy thing to find, but in time, I could recommend a number of movies you can see this film for free. You can go into a Google search and dare in fact search the words letter C movies, and there'll be dare in fact an app where you can see pretty much anything for free. More than likely, you might have to search this through R.I.P.D. or R.P.P.D. and search it that way. But, excuse me, hickle in my chickle. So, you could also go through apps that are to, of course, be Google searched, called Fox HD Movies. You'll have a title that won't say that, but you'll have a logo that'll say so. And the title of it will be Play 1080p HD Movies, whichever. And so you can go on to that app, and basically with the combination of those two apps together, you can pretty much see anything that is to be actually free. You can go on to probably another app called TV Crush and go on to find that app also. And yeah, I think that's roughly about it. There's probably a number of apps that I'd probably recommend it through a stretch of time here. Or you can go and probably just kind of, there are probably some apps in Google that'll just say, hey, you can rent this if that's what you eventually want to do. So, with that said, let's break down this film. Or let's kind of tee it up for people that have probably never heard of this in their life, the Rest in Peace department. So, we come and find our character Nick, who is to, of course, be a police officer in current time police station. So, Nick is to go on and is to be hiding some gold in his house, underneath this orange tree. And so, Nick is to have some second thoughts about having this, hiding this gold, and wanting to turn it back in because it's the right thing to do. Well, Nick's partner Reyes, who is Kevin Bacon's character, is to want to refuse Nick doing that because Hayes has an alternate motive here. He is to desperately go and take all these gold pieces and form a artifact of sorts that is going to be otherwise tied to the supernatural world. It seems that Nick has spent so much time with his partner, not realizing the whole entire time that his partner Hayes was to be this thing called a deado. A deado is to be a person who is disguising as a human being, but in all actuality, this thing is a dead like thing presenting itself as it is to have been a living thing. And so both Roy and both Hayes have to go and find these deados and pop them out to make sure that these things are to be deados, and then chase after them, guns a-blazing, and either wipe them out by shooting them in the head with the guns that they are to hold on to, and they are to figure out what is up with all this gold. It seems that every case that they are to be involved in, they continue to find these things, these gold pieces, and Nick is to realize how familiar all these pieces are, and so he's trying to figure out why these pieces are to seemingly be everywhere. And so they eventually have to go to informants, and they have to figure out and do some detective work to figure out what's really going on. So, with that said, it kind of breaks down as an IMDb film, but it also kind of breaks down as a detective movie, and it kind of has like a cluster of interesting kind of action sequences that are just really comedic and really just fun. We also have Roy and Nick, who are to have a avatar that they are to wear. So it's kind of funny, like these characters are kind of like, if you were to fuse them into a video game, like they would, to everyone else, not look the way they look, which I think is kind of a fun kind of approach. So, like, it's kind of fun to see both sides of it, where we have the Jeff Bridges side of things, and then we also have the Marissa Miller side of things when we see Roy's avatar, and how basically everyone is hitting on Roy at some points in this film, which I find hilarious. But we also have Nick, who is just kind of realizing what is to be put forth with his avatar, and how basically he's just wearing the avatar of an Asian man of sorts. So, going on to this film, let's go and break it down further. Let's go into spoilers. Let's go and say that it's about that customary time, yet again, to go into that double 5 time territory. Because it's about that time to spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of the film, like I said, we have both Nick and eventually Roy going and fighting the forces of evil, but there has to be an origin story of Nick before we get there. So, Nick is to, of course, be a person who is to bury these pieces of gold under this orange tree. And so Nick is waking up, well, not quite waking up, sharing a bed with Julia, his wife. And so Julia is to be surprised by Nick bringing her an orange tree. And Nick is to mention that it's like, well, yeah, like, I know that this is your favorite. It supposedly is a symbol of prosperity. So, like, things might be going well for us. So, like, that whole thing is kind of a foreshadowing of Nick trying to maybe have a reason for why they come into wealth or something like that. Because they might be selling off this gold sometime soon. So, well, both Nick and Julia are heading off to doing what they're doing. Julia is to go on to a jog. Nick is to go off to his detective job. And Nick is to go and tell Julia, like, watch those ankles weirdly. So does Nick have an ankle fetish also? Because it seems like Roy does. So Nick goes off with Hayes, and so uh, we have both of them going off uh, to go into their locker room, where it seems like some guys have taken upon themselves to uh, go and shower and have a towel. Hayes is desperately asking one of the other police officers, just like, "Hey man, like, buy a rope." And so this guy has to go and grab this towel and just be like, "Hey, like, do you guys want to see anything?" And they're like, "Hey man, like, put that thing away." So Nick is talking to Ray or Hayes, and is to say, "You know what? I'm having second thoughts about putting that gold back. Like, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to give this evidence to just kind of have a clear conscience." And Hayes is just like, "Well, like, but think about it, man. Like, think about the money we could spend on this. Like, think of all the speedboats and whatever we can buy." And so Nick is like, "Hey, man, do whatever you want with the gold. Like, I want to go and put this into evidence because it's the right thing to do." And so Hayes is like, "Okay, I guess we'll just be like poor and working here forever, and like that's fine." So now they are to go on to some drug raid of sorts, going after a guy I believe whose name is Garza. And so we have Nick who's going on the radio having Hayes or hazing Hayes about about how like, "Hey, we need an inspiring speech by Hayes," and all that Hayes really says is like, "Come on everybody, just kind of be safe, all right?" Like, he just kind of says these like piddly like things where it's just like, "Hey, let's just go in there, let's just kind of like, let's be cool about it, like let's like think smart here." So Nick is to go and make fun of Hayes because he's to have his good luck charm, his St. Christopher's medal. And so Hayes is just like, "Well, hey, man, I got that from my grandmother. Like, give me a break about it." So Nick is to mention how it's a date repeller. Like, but there's a whole motive behind the whole medal that we aren't even aware of, the St. Christopher's medal. So these guys go off and do this raid. It seems like there's a big, massive number of SWAT and all kinds of things going into this place. So they go through and they're going after Garza. And so Nick is to make it to uh, getting to every bad guy, to taking them all out. And so Nick is to turn around and see Hayes there, and he's like, "Whoa!" It's like Hayes, like, "Hey, man, like same side, same team." So Nick is like, "Yeah, I guess we got everybody," and Hayes is like, "Yeah, not yet, because I'm not gonna let you go and take all that gold." So Hayes shoots up Nick, murders him, and so Nick is to wake up, seemingly with the entire world frozen. So Nick is just kind of confused about what's going on. It seems like every single thing, even like the flames that are from behind him and any number of things, all kinds of stuff where people would be moving, are all weirdly frozen. To, I guess, have this only be that a person who is dead like be like here at this point in time. So Nick goes outside this building to all of a sudden see this like whirlpool, spiral going into the sky, where all of a sudden Nick is to be sucked into this kind of whirlwind like thing into the sky, and so he all of a sudden is to be thrusted into this desk talking to a girl named the Proctor, where of course the Proctor is to talk to Nick and just be like, "Hey, like, do you think you can understand what's going on with you right now?" And then like I guess the wheels are starting to turn and the Proctor's like, "Oh, I think he's getting it." So Roy is to be like, "I'm dead?" And Proctor's like, bingo, Yahtzee, come on, like, you got it. So the Proctor is to mention that Nick has a certain assortment of skills that they can use. And so they're wanting, or they're willing to have Nick go and join the R.I.P.D. So that way they can kind of usher him on to heaven when his time is up. And so we have Nick kind of going on to just say, well, okay, sure, I'll join your rest in peace department. Sounds like something he'll want to eventually be a part of. So Nick gets branded this RIP thing upon his chest. He has to kind of reveal it to us, so that way he is to show us this weird looking tattoo that he is be branded upon because he made this choice to agree to this. So, because Proctor had said that it's either that Nick is to face judgment, which he won't even know where he's guaranteed to go, whether he's going to go to hell or heaven. So it's like, hey, like, do you want a guaranteed way into the golden pearly gates? Or do you want to just kind of roll the dice and hope the best? So Nick agrees. So Nick is to be heading into this precinct where we start to see certain deados, and like this is kind of like the Men in Black kind of part of this show or part of this movie, where like now Nick, like Will Smith's character, is to be ushered in what this world really looks like for a person that has never seen anything like this before. So Nick, of course, gets a character like the Tommy Lee Jones like character, the kind of grizzled veteran that is to, of course, be of a person who had, I guess, died in the Wild Wild West era. And so it seems there is to be one deado that ends up going loose, and Roy immediately goes and shoots it and lethally kills it. And so they're like, hey, man. And so Roy's just like, well, what? Like, no one else wants to lethal up here? And so we have Roy, who I guess is to be a take no prisoners, old fashioned kind of guy. So, and plus he's a loner. And so Proctor is to tell Roy, it's like, well, hey, here's a new partner. Like, love it or leave it. So Roy, of course, is to go off with Nick. And so we find out that evidently this RIP department is to be somehow like underneath a VCR repair store, which I'm like, yeah, like nobody's probably going to even know if you watch this now, possibly what a VCR even is at some point. But if you do, 10 points to Gryffindor for you. Could I get that exchanged in Bitcoin? Could I get that exchanged in some kind of other currency? No. 10 points to Gryffindor. What will it be for? I don't know, but 10 points regardless. So maybe that would be 30 points by now. Anyways, pushing on. So the cool thing that I like about this is Roy, first off, is to take Nick and help him understand that Nick doesn't look like Nick. That Nick is to look like an Asian man. And so Nick is like, so what? So Roy is to kind of break down that this world cannot fathom or understand that they are who they are. And so divine intervention, whichever, or just the heavens that be, or the whoever is control of RIPD, will force that if Nick is to try to explain to anybody who if Nick tries to explain who he is to anyone, it will never work. Supposedly it'll come up as some gook like thing, and so also we have it to where no one can actually see like this technology of which that they are to hold within them. So these guns like come off as bananas to people, and so like what we see with both Roy and Nick, when we finally get to Roy or Nick's avatar, it looks completely different, which I thought was really fun. I'm like, oh, okay, so like they're trying to hide the fact of everything to these people, and I kind of find that to be fun. I found that to be like really smart. It's just like, oh, okay, so there's got to be some real secrets going on here, which I kind of find funny or fun to kind of play around with here. But it seems that when a Deado is to pop out and is to show itself, like people really do see that. People get to see this actual rage monster, and I'm like, oh, okay, so not everything is going to be hidden. Not everything is all going to work. But I also wanted to try and understand, especially the Jeff Bridges and Pulaski moments where like Pulaski is to full on be immersed, and then Jeff Bridges is to be using this like grappling gun esh like thing. That's the point where I would have wanted to see like, okay, but how is this broken down in real? The like is Jeff Bridges just an invisible person? Is he Spider-Man? Like how are they justifying Jeff going and kind of having like himself climb up this wall with this weaponry of sorts? I would like to see certain parts in the Avatar part of things, but I guess like they didn't want to show that because they were gonna try to figure out how to work that out. But anyways, so let's get to it. Uh, so the first thing that Roy does is take Nick to his own funeral to make him realize that he is dead. People are moving on. People are grieving after him. And I guess that's always the way to do things. When you immediately die, you go to your funeral. And so I thought that that was like a real cool part to be like the kind of the way to break somebody in is to tell them like, yeah, like just in case it hasn't sunk in yet, you are dead. But Nick goes off and runs off to try and tell his wife that he's still alive. So he runs off into this funeral to go and grab his wife to tell him, hey, I'm still here. I'm still alive. And so that's when Roy breaks it to Nick that, like, dude, that's not going to work. You can't tell them that. It just comes off as blah, 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 blah to them. So they'll never understand it. And you can keep trying, but it's not going to work. So Nick also is to see Hayes, and he's, of course, to be upset with Hayes because he killed him. So, but let's move on. So, we consistently have, like, in the very beginning of this, where supposedly Nick is to sink in and have a moment to, like, have this sink in that he is dead, but Roy is talking the whole time. And like not giving him a real moment to just kind of bask in the fact that he is dead and giving him the ability to process this. And at one point, Nick grabs Roy and is like, you talk too often or too much. Like every single time that Roy is to get like a moment to himself without Roy talking, Roy just keeps on chiming in. And so Nick goes on to just ridicule Roy about that, where it's just like, give me a break. Like, I just need, like, it seems like everywhere Nick is to go, there is to be someone kind of, like, giving him the rules and what's going on here. And so Nick is just like, how can he really understand what's really going on when he has zero time to really process anything? It's just go, go, go. So the next thing that they are to set up Nick with is to go into his very first case. So we have Nick, who is to go on to a guy named Stanley Nowicki, or Nowicki. And so it's kind of funny because Nick is to say, it's like, hey man, I got this case. I got it. Like, Nick is to mention how Roy, like, his his police time was so many years ago that Nick has probably a lot more experience than Roy does, and Roy's like, "Oh, really? Huh?" Yeah, anything that you were to do, Nick, in your previous life means diddly here. Like, it's a whole new set of rules. It's a whole new ballpark. So, whatever you thought that you know, put it in the crapper, because like this is a whole new ordeal. So Nick is to think that he's gonna go in there and tell this deado what for, and so Roy's like, no, you get the cards. I'm gonna do the talking. So Roy knocks on the door. The door opens up. It's Stanley, who is to be Robert. Actually, I'm like, man, I've seen this guy in so many things. Like, I've seen him in like Hitman's and or Hitman, and I've seen him in Prison Break. I'm like, it's always nice to like find a movie that there's to be some guy where it's like, oh, I know that guy. So Roy is to come in and bring in Italian food because for some reason it seems that deados are to hate the smell of it or some kind of something with it. And so I'm like, okay, so there has to just be like, I guess one kind of weakness of this to kind of bring these things out if it's not to just hold a gun to their face. So I like that. Like, I like when you have like a supernatural kind of thing and there's some kind of like, there always is some kind of weakness that is to be an unconventional thing where it's like salt or it's like holy water or some kind of something. So, which I guess is a, like, salt maybe not really all that conventional, but like holy water is just like, well, of course. But anyways, pushing on. So Roy goes and is to sit down with Stanley, and so uh, he talks it out, and so he has to eat Italian food in front of him, and he does this in such like a sloppy like manner where it's like, oh no, yeah, and he's talking to him, and I'm just like, man, you clean, nah. Like, it's just hanging off his mouth, and so, and he's like spitting it too, and it's just like, I'm like, that's so gross. So Nick is going on and reading all these cards where like he's mentioning about Ash Wednesday and this girl who has a specific kind of car and all these like goofy questions. And so Stanley is like, I don't even know how I'm supposed to answer that. Like, no, yes. He doesn't even know how to answer it. And like Roy's like, answer him. I think that the cards are to be like a confusing element to where like it doesn't really matter what the cards are to say. It's just to like be this kind of weird line of dialogue. Uh, but I like they reintroduce the cards yet again. Uh, but Nick is like, dude, like we don't need the cards. So they're throwing these cards at him. They're throwing this smell of Indian food around him, and so of course Stanley is to get to a breaking point where all of a sudden Stanley is to pop into this deado, and so this deado is to have this huge, long, stretched out mouth, which Roy used to say the reason for that is, I guess, that Stanley had been some snitch in his previous life. So it's like, okay, so there has to be a reason why these characters are to have like looked the way they look after they die. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. So now this Ditto, of course, is to run out of this building and jumps from his window all the way down to the road, and he smashes onto the ground, and then uh, gets up and tries to walk back off because like these characters are now dead. It's not like they can probably feel the pain, but they're not going to die again. So all of a sudden Nick is now like seeing Roy run at him and grab onto Nick and thrust him through this window. And so Roy is screaming out the words, "Relax, body!" And Nick is like, "What's wrong with you?" He's like, "Relax your body!" And so, like, we have Roy who's riding Nick like a horse on a rodeo, and Roy is to accidentally lose his hat, which he like gripes about that he's lost his hat, and so he tries to desperately through parts of this film find a hat replacement, and at the end of it, the proctor is to go and find Roy's hat so that he can be happy again. So they fall to the ground. Neither one of them, both Roy or Nick, are to die because they're already dead. So there's no way that they could have died twice. So Nick was to mention, it's like, well, yeah, but it still hurts. So Nick goes on and is to go and realize that the Deado is still there. So Nick, of course, is to try to figure out a way to do something with this Deado, and this Deado ends up barfing up these gold pieces, and so Nick is to realize what these pieces are, and he starts grabbing on it and starts looking at it, and so Roy ends up shooting this Deado in the head and killing it off, and so Roy is like, dude, like, you realize that that just came out of somebody's mouth, but Nick is just so fascinated by it. It's like, why are these Deados have so much of these gold pieces? Like, because, and plus also, Nick has seen these gold pieces from once before because he buried them in underneath this orange tree. So Nick is to go on to take most of these gold pieces to the evidence room, but he's to keep one for good reason. And so Nick is to ask Roy about this gold piece, these gold pieces, and what is the connection between these Deados and these gold pieces. And so Nick is to ask Roy if he has any kind of informants to like to see what this whole connection is. And so uh, Roy is to say, "Hey, yeah, I have a snitch. I have somebody." So they end up going off to Wrigley Field. I think Wrigley Field, like the Boston field, the Boston Red Sox field. So, and I don't think that's Wrigley Field at all. I didn't look that up. I didn't bother. So, no offense. I don't know what any stadium field whatever thing is. So I think Wrigley. Let me pause here. My apologies, because I looked it up. Fenway Park is Boston Stadium. I guess Wrigley Field is the Chicago Cubs Stadium. My bad. Like immediately when it comes in mind of a stadium, like I immediately think of like, oh, Wrigley Field is any stadium out there. But then I don't actually know what it is because like I don't know the actual stadium names. I don't even know the stadium name that is to be, of course, in Minnesota because it's a new one, that's for sure. But anyways, so hey man, my apologies. So I probably should have memorized that anyways because I've seen stuff like Fever Pitch, which takes mostly place in Fenway, and also are there other Boston movies that take place there for baseball? Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there probably is. So going on, pushing on. So they make it to Fenway Park again. I'm sorry. Uh, I don't know baseball stadiums good enough. So I just rattle off a name that I don't even know what it actually is. So they go to Fenway Park. They talk to Elliot, who is to be kind of hiding out. And so Nick is to go and squeeze information out of this guy. It's kind of funny that Roy is to go and get them both hot dogs. And so Nick is like, why are we even eating a hot dog? And Roy's just like, I like the mouth movement. I like the mouth movement. Because there's nothing else that they could do. So why don't they just have chewing gum then? Like, because you can't exactly consume it anyways. But I don't know, I guess a hot dog, whatever. Like, because Nick couldn't even taste the food. So it's just kind of like a wasted thing. Um, so or why, like, if Roy is actually to have been like this cowboy western kind of guy, why not have had him just had like sunflower seeds? Wouldn't that make a lot of sense considering you're at a ballpark anyways? That's just rationalizing in me, but whatever. So they go, and so Nick is to actually question Elliot about this goal because Roy is just going off and trying to see if there's a hat that he could go on and try on and see if it fits him, and none of them do. But he's just getting really ticked off that he doesn't have his hat because he lost it. So, uh, so Nick is to get no information from Elliot, but Nick is to give Elliot this piece of gold, and then both Elliot and Roy walk off. And so Roy is like, well, why did you give him that piece of gold? And Nick is like, I did that for a reason. Because Elliot goes off, I guess after the game is over, and is to go and give this piece of gold to Hayes. And so Roy is to tell Nick, like, hey, wasn't that your old partner? And Nick is like, well, yeah. So Hayes, I guess, is to be the accumulator of all of this gold. And so they continue to follow Hayes and find out that he is to have gone on to Julia's house and kind of give her, I guess, some food of which that Nick used to deliver to her all the time. And so Nick is to break it to Julia, like, hey, like, did Nick ever tell you about anything, about any kind of, like, things that he was, like, keeping close to the vest lately? And Julia's like, well, no, what do you mean? So, so Hayes is to go on into their backyard and easily just pull this orange tree right out of the ground, which Kevin Bacon is a strong man. Very strong. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. Kevin Bacon is a very strong man. Hence why there's always usually 7 degrees to connect him at any point in time. So, even with a random person like me, for some bizarre reason. Anyways, so Kevin is to pull this tree from out of the ground, and so he is to grab the things of gold and be like, oh, Julia, Nick, he's a horrible person. He couldn't have just snuck at night and got these gold pieces. Like, he had to do it while Julia was there. He couldn't have just waited when Julia was running off because she has to jog every day to go and get these gold pieces. But so uh so now Hayes goes and takes all of these gold pieces and is to go on and have us see this character called Pulaski. And so Hayes and Pulaski is doing this gold trade off. Pulaski's to have a bunch of these gold pieces into this briefcase, and Pulaski is to walk off. Very much uh, Elvis-esque like character. That is to have, of course, the Elvis sunglasses and the kind of the sideburns and so on and so forth. Uh, Devin Ratray, like I have like seen him on like other things. Like it's kind of funny how like this movie was kind of like the breakout thing for this actor because I eventually saw him on like the later seasons of like Supernatural and like all kinds of other things for a decent while for this guy after this film. So I was like, okay, this is kind of cool that he kind of broke out after this film and kind of went on to do plenty of other things. So Pulaski. So both Nick and Roy are to go up from behind this guy and are, of course, to grab onto him. And Nick is to say that he wants to go and take the reins on this one. And Roy is just kind of like, well, what? Like, you're questioning my methods? And Nick is like, Roy, you don't even have a method. Like, you don't even have a way about going about things. So Roy is like, okay, you have your way. Like, go ahead and saddle up and stay frosty or or icy hot or whatever. Because the very first time that both Nick and Roy go off to do their first like breakdown of a deado, we have it to where Roy is saying all these goofy like you gotta know the lingo. You gotta stay frosty and icy hot. And I'm like, what the is this? Like Roy has these like weird goofy things, and then Nick reiterates that later on where it's like, "Are you frosty, Roy?" And he's like, "Icy hot." I'm like, okay, whatever. This is like it's just them like having fun with one another, and it's just kind of them just kind of keeping it light. So so they grab Pulaski and they bring him into this freezer, and so Nick's character is to grab a thing called cumin, uh, I guess some kind of spice of sorts, and so they go into this freezer, and so uh, Pulaski is to just be like, oh, well, you guys must be the R.I.P.D, and like he starts kind of making fun of the avatars that these people are in. So Nick is to go on and start dumping cumin on his hand, this spice onto his hand, and so is going to start questioning him for information. But Pulaski is to say it's like, well, hey man, like I'm tired of hiding, so Pulaski just dips his face into Nick's hand and just starts like thrusting his face onto this of course spice, and so all of a sudden Pulaski is to turn into this massive blob of a deado, sadly, and so he starts going throughout the town, and so we have Roy who's like contain, because that's what he said in the last thing was like contain, like so that way nobody knows about these deados. So but Pulaski is running throughout this entire thing of streets because he tackles and pushes down both Roy and Nick, and then runs off to scramble through town. And so Roy is to have this like Gatling gun attachment to his weapon to blast off to attach himself onto Pulaski's butt. And so Roy is being dragged around by Polanski through the streets of Boston. And so how this all breaks down is that Nick is to go on into the building and is to go to this elevator. Oh, one thing that I forgot about. In the very first case, also with Stanley, Roy is also to mention that broken stuff is usually an indicator that there's a deado nearby. Because supposedly he is to touch some elevator button, and the elevator button was to take them to the right floor where Stanley was at. So it's like, that's a kind of really interesting thing that I don't think that they go enough into in this show. Like, I honestly think R.I.P.D could have honestly be broken down as a series. Like, I think that they could have really done some kind of series with this, and I think it really would have worked out well. And I think people would be more accepting with a series, just kind of break down this fairly better, or break down the whole thing a lot better than you probably would just film, because there's a rush to kind of get this out there. And you can honestly have a lot of fun with these characters and have to and do this kind of slow build of a thing. So, plus I think probably a lot of people forgot about this movie, so it'd be like a refreshing thing to just kind of see a show presented that maybe isn't just like the movie, maybe it's some kind of like rebooted like thing. But I think people would be accepting of a R.I.P.D series, and because I think like Men in Black worked well as a cartoon for a lot of people, up until certain other movies and shows kind of dampened that whole interest. But still, um, but pushing on back to Polanski. So Polanski's to go on, and so Ryan is to go into this elevator, and so he is to push, like he is to go on and seemingly push a button to try and get to the highest level as quickly as possible. But he's like, you know what? So Ryan goes and shoots the top of the elevator, and then shoots the part of the elevator that can quickly get this elevator to go up as quickly as possible. And so Polanski is to go and try to get to this top of this building and tear open this elevator door to try and go down. But Nick is to, of course, be going up, so they kind of collide into one another. And then Roy is to jump into the empty elevator door to jump in on this whole thing, to have all of a sudden this elevator come flying up into the sky and then dropping down. So this breaks down that Polanski is to run off, and with the gold piece, of course. And so now, or no, wait, maybe they do get all the gold pieces, but Polanski ends up running off to save himself. So, because no matter how many times Nick it was to kind of shoot Polanski, Roy kept telling him, shoot him in the head, shoot him in the head. And consistently, we had a point where either Nick was to, of course, like, have this car come flying at him so he fell over, or just any of number of scenarios were to prevent them to take down Polanski, which leaves Polanski to the final battle in the later part of this film. So Now we push on to, of course, have at it that Roy and Nick go off back to their precinct to have Proctor mention that they have never had it in RIPD history where a deado was to be seen by the public. And they're like, well, hey, like, there's nothing we can do, like, so on and so forth. So now both Nick and Roy are to have gone to needing to be judged by the Eternal Affairs. So both of them go off to seek judgment, and so Proctor is to have this kind of this tube shot to her. So she goes on and is to see what their judgment is, and supposedly both Nick and Roy are going to get erased soon because of what had happened. But also, it seems that both Nick and Roy had discovered something. They had discovered uh, the staff of Jericho, and all these gold pieces collected together are to immerse into one artifact that is to be the staff of Jericho, which I guess is to have the ability to have every dead like person come back to Earth and create this apocalypse upon the world, I guess. So now with both Roy and Nick realizing that their time is soon going to come to a wrap here, and that there might be several other detectives or several other people that might be a better person suited for this case. Both Nick and Roy are to go on to have Nick again try to make it to Julia to convince her that Nick is to be Nick. And so Julia is kind of running these laps around this field, and so Nick is to kind of touch her on the face and like, hey, I'm still here. And so Julia is to not really know what that is, and so or know what that means, and so Julia walks off. So Roy is to tell Nick, it's like, no, what you're doing is awful. Like, you're basically haunting her. And like Roy is to mention that the numerous times that he has gone on to rent Love by the Hour and all this kind of stuff, that he never really got to be with anybody. But it seems like both Roy and Proctor have this kind of uh, uh, like thing between one another. There's some kind of thing there, but like we don't really truly go into it until the very end, where supposedly Proctor ends up like billy goating Roy by grabbing him onto the beard by his hair and just biting onto it, and Roy's like, she billy goated me. It's a thing we used to do. So so now Nick's walking off, and so Nick is to now just be so frustrated because Roy is to go on and on about how at his burial he just saw a bunch of coyotes going and uh, like chewing up his body. That was the only real burial he was to ever have gotten, and so Nick is so like tired of hearing that it's like, oh, wah wah, you didn't get a right proper burial. And so Nick is just like, you know what, those coyotes, like I hope that they did some horrific things to your body. And Roy's like, well, they did. Like one of the coyotes like made love to my eye hole or my eyeball. And so Nick is like, great. I hope they did it to both of your eyes. And so Roy is telling Nick that it's like, yeah, you know what, like, Nick, this all takes time. It's like, and like you have to just understand like your death, and that and that you're in your afterlife. And Roy is to say that Nick is bringing back things up to the surface that Roy has been suppressing for a number of years. So Roy now goes on and has this kind of bagpipe accordion that he's going and he's singing this song called "Bitter Man." Words, like, and he's singing this like song about better man, and he's like, he calls it better man, and like he sings the word better man, and he's like, the song's called better man, and Nick is like, yeah, 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 like, I get it. So how, and like just this weird goofy scene of this accordion and or it's like making him the better man, whatever. So Nick is going on and is to just be like, man, we're just gonna get a race tomorrow, and there's nothing we could really do. And Roy's like, well, yeah, how about you just pick up an instrument, and like maybe at least your death will have some kind of like fun kind of thing before you go. So Nick is to say, well, you know what, before we go, how about we kind of do one last thing? And so both of them decide to go off to Hayes's place to now confront him. And so Nick is to just try to realize, how is it that Hayes was to hide his like his deado like side of him, like the stench or the decaying part or whichever. And so Roy is to say, it's like, well, yeah, he probably has to have some kind of artifact or some kind of pendant or some kind of something that would prevent him from showcasing that. And so Nick is like, well, he did have a St. Christopher's medal, and Roy's like, well, that's probably good enough. So both of them head to Hayes' place, and so Roy is to go into the front door and kind of talk to Hayes, and Nick is to go out the back. So Roy is to talk to Hayes about uh, what's going on here, yada yada yada. And oh, there's also, as I consistently rebuttal and go into other things, um, Hayes was to also go and take a Deado and give him some artifact, which we find out is half of an ancient orb. And so Nick is to say, like, the R.I.P.D won't see this coming, and so he gives him one half of this ancient orb, and Nick is to keep the other half, or Hayes is to keep the other half. So, but let's go back to this. So Nick and uh, Nick and Roy go with Hayes and like talk about things. And so it seems that Hayes was going to go and grab this weapon, but Nick finds it before Hayes can use it. And so Nick points this gun at Hayes. And so Hayes immediately realizes that it's Nick that's to be in this avatar, and Nick is like, yep, you're right. So Nick is to tell Hayes to get rid of his his pendant or his medal. So he does, and so we all of a sudden see that this house is now changed. And so Roy's to say, it's like, yeah, that's some severe stink. That's some severe. Because the house just is in all shambles from what I guess it was before. And so Roy also finds this huge chunk of a gold piece. And so when Hayes is to see, of course, Roy, he sees the female version of him. And so Roy is to say, like, okay, well, like, we're going to bring you in, and tosses this gold X upon his shoulder. So they're bringing him in, they're bringing Hayes in. They're not gonna shoot him in the head. They're just gonna have him go in and like sit in the back as he's cuffed. So Hayes is to mention to Roy and ask him, like, hey, like, about Nick, like, he doesn't let things go now, does he? And Roy's like, eh. And Nick is like, shut up. It's like, yeah, he never lets things go. So they go into the precinct, and so uh, now Roy is to go on and have the other ancient orb piece with him because Hayes is to have it, and so Roy is to also deliver that gold piece. So what ends up happening is that uh, Roy is to hand all this stuff into evidence, and so the evidence person is like, "Hey, we've seen another piece just like this that was turned in earlier," and so they just toss it in the same bin where this ancient orb is, and they connect it together. These two pieces, it forces itself together, and so all of a sudden, the whole IMDb department just completely freezes, and we have Kevin Bacon's character Hayes, who's to mention how deados can actually uh, like have certain frequencies being heard by them. So that basically means that all of the RIPD personnel are frozen now, but the deados are to uh, completely go off and get every single piece of this gold and leave. And so both Roy and Nick are kind of slowly but surely trying to shift their bodies to shoot uh, Hayes and his people, but Nick can't. Roy is going off to shoot this orb, and he does, which kind of stops and has everybody come back to normal. But then, so every single person is to all go off and try to shove themselves into this elevator so that way they can go uh, and go after these guys to stop them from putting together uh, the uh, the staff of Jericho. There we go. So come to find out, we have Hayes who grabs Julia, and so Hayes is to showcase to Julia what he really and truly is a deado, and so Hayes is to sniff this cumin and is to change into this deado that has like this huge gap in his skull, because Hayes uh, was to tell, of course, Nick that supposedly he had died on some drug bust before, and because he was like Nick thought it was so miraculous that Nick was to have dodged that bullet, but he didn't, and so he died. So Hayes is to go off to be at this Commonwealth building, putting together this whole staff of Jericho. And so while him and all his minions are putting these gold pieces together, and we all of a sudden have this weird, goofy, um, like kind of thing going on with both Nick and uh, Roy kind of going in here and seeing uh, these kind of black holes appearing onto Earth and just trying to suck everything in consistently. And so, and I don't know exactly what that is to actually be. I didn't understand what that part was, what was happening there. And so, both Nick and Roy try to scramble to make it to the Commonwealth building. And so, once they actually do make it there, because uh, both Nick and Roy are going to have to deal with some deados to get there, because a lot of the deados that are to be collected with Polanski are all trying to stop Nick and Roy from getting to the Commonwealth building. But both Roy and Nick go and run over all the deados and then shoot them and kill them. And so they make their way to the Commonwealth building, where again they're going in guns blazing, trying to shoot through a lot of these deados. And so it just leaves both Nick and Hayes to fight it out. And so Roy is having to try to figure out how to take down this staff of Jericho that has now been built. And Hayes had to sacrifice Julia, so so that way the staff of Jericho could work, because supposedly there is always to be some kind of sacrifice. So while Hayes and Nick are fighting it out, Hayes is to mention that it didn't have to be Julia that was to be a sacrificial lamb here, but it was just like it was all just a full circle attempt to have Julia be the one sacrificed here. So, so Nick is trying to fight off Hayes, trying to take certain kind of metal pieces and smacking Hayes and whatever. But Hayes is also to get the drop on Nick by going and taking this rock and smashing him multiple times. And Hayes is like, Hayes is to say that killing Nick is always like a fun thing, and like it never gets old. So Roy, of course, is to try and figure out how to take down this staff of Jericho. He's trying to pull out pieces, but nothing is to really work. But supposedly the deados that were on this building had gone on and taken this one construction vehicle and had tossed it up against this one news reporter helicopter, and had, I guess, taken that helicopter down. So all of a sudden, this construction vehicle is now to be on the roof of this building, and so Roy is trying to take this lasso, rope it down, and pull it down, but he's having a very difficult time. So Nick is screaming for Roy, like, Roy, hurry up! Come on, Roy, hurry it up! So Roy is pulling and pulling and pulling, and then finally the staff of Jericho crashes against this construction vehicle, falling on top of it. So now the anyone who is to have been dead is to be sucked back into where they are, and so after that, it seems that there is nothing left to do but then to realize that both Nick and Roy teaming up together to go and shoot Hayes, because basically Hayes is now done for. And so Because, of course, Hayes was to realize that if he were to have gone into the afterlife or judgment, he was going to go to hell. So he thought the best thing that he could do was to just stay on Earth. But now he's getting shot by both Nick and Roy and to be defeated, I guess. So now, after this whole event is to be done and over with, it seems that Julia is to die. And so now Julia is to finally see Nick for Nick. And so Nick is to tell Julia, it's like, well, hey, like, I'll always be here, like, for you, but, like, you need to go and, like, have your own life now. Like, you need to kind of do your life without me in it. And so Nick is to tell, of course, Julia that she needs to, like, she's having a near-death experience, but she's not going to die here. So Nick is telling Julia to move on. So Julia is to wake up in a hospital, seemingly healing from her wounds, and the proctor is to check on Julia to make sure that she's okay. So, because I guess that's the proctor's disguise, is to be of some doctor. So Proctor ends up going off with Nick and Roy to tell them that they did a good job. Kind of like the one moment where Roy was to grade Nick on like a C plus kind of thing. It was like, well, hey, your body was your body helped my fall and this and that. But then afterwards, Roy goes and gives Nick an F because of how like insulting and whatever he is. So Proctor is to kind of like tell them like, well, hey, like the Eternal Affairs did give you judgment, but like they're letting you guys off with a warning, but Roy is going to get supposedly another 50 years left onto his sentence, so on and so forth. Uh, so Proctor is to go and give Roy back his hat, and then Billy goat him and then leave. So now that both of them are back to getting the job done, so to speak, Roy is to mention to Nick that Nick is to have gotten a different avatar, and so the avatar is to have been some little Girl Scout, and so we have both of them go into the car as their avatars, and they drive off, and so that's the way the movie just fizzles off and ends. So with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. It's a fun movie. It's a really fun piece. I really do enjoy it. But with that said, I'm also going to get the heck out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.